The sun had barely cleared the rooftops when the diner door swung open, and in that single moment, the room seemed to lose its breath. The heavy boots, the leather vest marked with worn patches, the quiet authority in the man's posture, all of it felt too big, too loud, too dangerous for a place that smelled of burnt coffee and cheap pancakes. No one noticed the waitress flinch except him, and no one heard what she whispered as she passed his table, except the man everyone feared. Before the hour was over, what he did next would leave the entire diner frozen in silence. If you believe that kindness still matters, that people deserve second chances, and that one small act can change everything, take a moment right now to like this video, share it, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel Only Kindness. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Her name was Mara Ellison, and she had been awake since dawn, tying her apron with fingers already sore from yesterday's shift. Daylight poured through the diner windows in soft gold streaks, but it never seemed to warm her. She moved fast, head down, memorizing orders and refilling cups, careful not to draw attention. At 27, her body already carried the weight of years that had been far too heavy: double shifts, overdue bills, a tiny apartment with flickering lights, and a quiet fear that never fully left her chest. The diner was supposed to be temporary, just until things got better, but temporary had stretched into years, and hope had become something she handled carefully, like glass already cracked. That morning had started like all the others. The regulars complained about the coffee. The cook shouted about eggs. A man near the window argued with his phone. Mara smiled when she had to and disappeared when she could. Then the door opened, and the atmosphere changed. Conversations slowed. Forks paused mid-air. The man who walked in didn't need to announce himself. His presence did that for him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his face marked by age and roads traveled, his gray-streaked beard neatly trimmed. The leather vest he wore carried the unmistakable insignia of the Hells Angels, faded but proud, like a flag that had survived storms. Some people looked away, some stared too long. The manager stiffened behind the counter, already calculating risks. Mara felt her stomach tighten, not from fear alone, but from exhaustion. She had seen bikers before. Most were loud, some were kind, some were trouble. But something about this man felt heavier, like a storm that didn't need thunder to be dangerous. He chose a booth near the middle, sat down slowly, and rested his hands on the table as if grounding himself. Mara approached with her notepad, her voice steady on the surface even as her heart raced. She took his order quickly, eyes lowered, and turned to leave. That was when she felt it, the sharp pull in her chest, the sudden wave of desperation she had been holding back for weeks. Without planning it, without even fully understanding why, she leaned in just slightly as she placed his coffee on the table and whispered a few broken words meant only for him. Words about being tired. Words about not knowing how much longer she could do this. Words about needing help but not knowing where to find it. She expected nothing. Maybe annoyance. Maybe laughter. Maybe anger. What she didn't expect was silence. The man didn't move right away. He didn't reach for his cup or look around. He simply sat there, eyes fixed on the steam rising from the coffee, as if her whisper had landed somewhere deep inside him. Mara straightened and walked away, her face burning with shame. She told herself she was foolish, that she had crossed an invisible line, that nothing would come of it except regret. The diner returned to its rhythm, but something had shifted. The man ate slowly, barely touching his food. His gaze followed Mara as she moved between tables, balancing plates and forced smiles. He noticed the bruise she tried to hide beneath her sleeve, the way she winced when she bent down, the way she flinched when the manager barked at her for a minor mistake. He noticed things because once, a long time ago, someone had noticed him when he was broken, and it had changed the direction of his life. His name was Rourke Calder, and he had lived enough lifetimes for two men. He had known hunger, violence, loyalty, loss. He had buried friends and made promises over fresh graves. He had also learned, painfully and slowly, that strength meant more than fear. It meant responsibility. It meant knowing when to stand still and when to act. When he stood up, chairs scraped and heads turned. The manager stiffened again, ready for confrontation. Rourke walked to the counter and placed a folded bill down, far more than the cost of his meal. He nodded once, said nothing, and headed for the door. Relief spread through the room like a sigh. Outside, daylight filled the street, bright and unforgiving. Rourke paused beside his motorcycle, helmet in hand, staring at the diner window. Through the glass, he could see Mara moving, small against the noise of the world. He thought of the whisper, of the quiet plea hidden beneath it. He thought of all the times he had walked away before learning how to stay. He didn't leave. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Inside, Mara's shift dragged on. Her feet ached. Her manager criticized her speed. A customer snapped at her for cold toast. She told herself to get through the day, just get through the day. When noon came, the diner filled with sunlight and people on lunch breaks. Then the door opened again. This time, it wasn't one man. Motorcycles lined the street, chrome flashing in the sun. The low rumble of engines rolled through the windows like distant thunder. One by one, men and women in leather vests entered the diner, calm, orderly, respectful. The chatter died completely. Fear flickered across faces. The manager's hand trembled as he wiped the counter. At the center of it all stood Rourke. He raised a hand, and the room seemed to freeze. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply spoke with a quiet authority that carried farther than any yell. He said they were there to eat, to pay, and to be treated like anyone else. He said there would be no trouble unless someone chose it. Then he did something no one expected. He turned toward Mara and asked her, gently, if she was all right. The question hit her harder than any insult ever had. For a moment, she couldn't answer. No one asked her that. Not really. Not without wanting something in return. Her throat tightened, and she nodded because shaking her head felt too dangerous. Rourke watched her carefully, as if that small answer told him everything he needed to know. The bikers took seats, filling booths and tables, ordering politely, thanking her when she brought plates. The diner transformed, fear slowly replaced by confusion, then something like awe. Tips piled up, smiles appeared, laughter even broke out in one corner. The manager's tone softened, his posture changing as he realized nothing bad was happening. Something good was. When the rush settled, Rourke stood again. He walked to the counter, his boots echoing in the sudden quiet. He spoke calmly, stating facts rather than accusations. He talked about fair wages, about respect, about how hard it was to survive when every dollar already had a place to go. He didn't threaten the manager. He didn't raise his voice. He simply made it clear that people were watching, that treatment mattered, and that kindness, once extended, had a way of coming back stronger than fear ever could. Then he turned to Mara and handed her an envelope. Inside was more than money. It was time. It was relief. It was a chance to breathe. Enough to fix her car. Enough to cover a few months of rent. Enough to remind her that survival didn't have to feel like drowning every day. Along with it was a card with a number written on it, and a simple message about work that paid better, about people who looked out for their own, about a door that was open if she chose to walk through it. Mara's hands shook as she held it. Tears blurred her vision, but she didn't hide them. For once, she didn't feel weak for needing help. She felt seen. The bikers finished their meals, paid generously, and left as quietly as they had arrived. Engines started. The street returned to normal. But the diner never quite did. That afternoon, sunlight felt warmer. The air felt lighter. The manager spoke to Mara differently, with caution, even respect. Customers smiled more, and Mara stood a little straighter, her steps lighter, her chest no longer so tight with fear. Rourke rode away, the wind pressing against him, the road stretching ahead. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a man who had finally listened when someone whispered instead of screamed. He knew the world wouldn't change overnight. He knew Mara's life wouldn't magically become easy. But he also knew that moments like this mattered. That kindness, when backed by action, could interrupt even the hardest cycles. Days later, Mara would sit in her small apartment, sunlight spilling across the floor, and realize she was smiling for no reason at all. She would make plans. She would imagine a future that didn't feel impossible. And every time doubt crept in, she would remember the sound of motorcycles in daylight, not as a threat, but as a promise that help could come from unexpected places. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that compassion still exists in a world that often feels cold, please take a moment now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Only Kindness. Your engagement helps these stories reach the people who need them most. And before this story ends, we have one special request for you. Comment below with a single word that represents what you felt while listening: hope, kindness, courage, or faith. Your words matter more than you know. Because sometimes, all it takes is a whisper in the middle of an ordinary day, and a person willing to listen, to change everything.